Today we're here in the P-40 restoration shop. We're on the P-40 Warhawk reconstruction. My name is Richard. I want to acknowledge our museum staff that does a great job. Our director is Ben Johnson. Rick Lessingring is the curator. And behind the camera today is Mackenzie, who we couldn't do without. She's great. We're going to talk about some of the models today, and then we'll go up into the cockpit and show what we have accomplished so far with the fuel tank. So before we said that the P-40 was a morphing or an offshoot of the P-36 Mohawk. Don Berlin was the lead designer, and he developed the P-36 Mohawk, which had a radial engine, and the Army Air Corps put out new requirements for a new fighter. They wanted the fighter to have the Allison V12 engine. It had to have armor plating and forward windscreen, armored windscreen. It had to have self-sealing fuel tanks. Self-sealing fuel tanks, armor plating, and I can't remember the last one. It'll come to me in a little bit. But the different models, they start out as the long noses because the reduction gear came right off the crank of the engine, came straight off. So they were a little bit longer, and they gave a more sleek shape to the airframe. But that was the B and C models. After that, they went to the short nose version, which was an offset reduction gear, which raised the thrust line and gave them a little bit better aerodynamics. When that occurred, they increased the size of the radiators, and the chin scoop became larger and was a conic shape for this aircraft. In the later models, in the M and N models, they actually moved the tail back about 9 inches, and that was to counteract the P-forces or P-torque from the engines. During the war, or through the war, they would push this Allison engine to more and more horsepower. And as they did that, they needed more lateral stability, so they needed a longer lever to counteract that torque. So the later models had that. Our model is an N model. The N model was the most produced of all the models. And this N model is distinctive with the cut down turtleback behind the pilot. That was for visibility, right here. And also the canopy was one-piece glass, plexi, so that you had a good field of view. This aircraft is the fuselage and the wings are all made from duralumin, or Dural. Dural or duralumin was an alloy developed in the early 1900s for the Zeppelins in Germany. And it's aluminum with 4% copper, 1.6% magnesium, and 0.4% manganese. And it's extremely strong, just about as strong as steel, but very light. The only problem is it can, over time, become very hard and become brittle. This material was used extensively in aircraft in World War II. It was the primary aircraft metal. The fuselage is semi-monocoque, meaning that most of the strength is right in the outer skin itself. The formers and the stringers, the lengthwise, are there to hold the skin together, but the main strength is in the skin itself. So in the Army Air Corps, we named this the Warhawk, and then it was given different models, a BC up to N model. The British called them, the RAF called them Tomahawks for the B and C models, and then after that they called them Kitty Hawks. And in the desert, this plane was used by the British in North Africa and other places as a bomber, and it became known as the Kitty Bomber. And in North Africa, it was used to great effect for ground attack and close air support. The other thing was, there was a story, Count Stauffenberg, who was in the plot, the July plot to kill Hitler in '44, was strafed by a couple of Kitty bombers in North Africa when he was serving with the Africa Corps. He lost his, I believe, one of his eyes, one of his hands, and partially 2 fingers on the other hand. And that was why he could only arm one of the bombs that was supposed to kill Hitler in the Wolf's Lair in Poland. But the aircraft that attacked him that day was a Kitty bomber. The other thing about this plane, with its internal fuel load, it had a fairly good range for being a fighter of this era. It had a range of about 825 miles. In comparison, a Spitfire, British Spitfire, had about 450 miles, and a Messerschmitt 109 about 425 miles. So it had a relatively good range for the era, and it was built in the 30s design. So the wing structure is extremely strong. In a high-speed dive, in a high-speed turn, this plane can survive where other aircraft of the era, like a Japanese Zero, could not take the G-forces this plane could take. So that came into tactics with the AVG, the Flying Tigers in China, but that's for a later story. So we're finished with this. We'll now go up onto the plane and look at the fuel tank assembly we've done. Okay, since the last time we were here, we've done quite a bit of work on the interior behind the armor plating. The armor plate would sit right in this channel here and come up, and the pilot would sit right here. Right behind him is the main fuselage fuel tank, which would be self-sealing. This is a replica. It's just been placed there. Before, the last time we were here, we had not done any of the turtleback on this model. On this model and N model, it's cut down so that the pilot has much better view behind him, and he can see both sides when he looks back. We have done quite a bit of work in recreating this turtleback, which actually lightens the aircraft because there's less material. And in this model, they lightened as much as they could because weight was speed, and they wanted to be as competitive as they could. Wherever you have an advantage in speed, you always hopefully will have an advantage overall. And 2, 3, 4, 5 miles an hour may be the difference between life and death. So far, this is how far we've got. We placed the rear canopy just to see how it would look. the airframe has been bent and twisted, so it doesn't fit exactly, but we'll have to do some adjusting as best we can. But so far, that's what we've got done. And I thank you very much for having me, and see you next time.